Uh, Hello, guys. My name is Cyrus, and I am going to provide the overview for Unit 6 of AP Art History, and we are doing African art. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so some important themes that most African artworks focus on is spirits and ancestry. Mainly most traditional African arts are focused on spirits and nature and ancestral worship. Along with this, art was made so that people would believe more and would be motivated by art. So, like mainly, some art was made to impact our Africans' belief and in the idea of connection with spirits, and art helped reinforce that idea of the spirit world and ancestry. And finally, like some artworks focus on royalty. Kings wanted to show, like in some instances, like kings wanted to show their divine rule over others, like the noble people, and how they would be considered uh, like uh, um, like powerful per se. So like I've included some examples here. So we got on this one right here, we got the Nikisi. I'm sorry for my pronunciation, but it's Nikisi Nikondi, and often um oh sorry, this is Sika Dwa Kwofi. So it's basically showing the power displayed through the hierarchical scale, where the most important person is the largest in the figure, and it shows like that divine light. Then over here, you got the pool mask, the female pool mask, and basically how it shows how the natural world is charged with the spiritual presence. It also arts this artwork acts as a way to negotiate with powerful and unpredictable forces. This right here on the top right, as you can see, is the Sika Dwa Kofi, and that basically is. I mean, sorry, this is the Nkisi Nkondi. My mistake. They're carved out of animals or humans, and were charged with medicinal and spiritual substances that aid to communicate within the spirit world. Okay, we'll go to the next slide right here. So some historical context of Africa. Some important notes. Africa is really huge. Like it's home to around 3,000 distinct ethnic groups and has around 2,000 languages. In comparison, you can fit the U.S., the China, most of Europe, and most Middle Eastern countries in Africa and still have room to spare. That's how huge Africa is. Um, Again, so that helps in understanding artworks, and so each art style is changed within location. Um, Along with that, spirit, as mentioned before, spirituality and ancestry were one of the key notes in terms of African art. They focused on that was one of the major points, and ritual performances. Some artworks were considered like, especially masks, were considered complete when they used in dance. So before that, their true meaning would need to be possessed once it's completed a ritual dance per se. Um, so basically, some more info. The sheer distance between regions in Africa allowed thousands of unique artistic traditions to develop independently. And in traditional African art, in terms of ritual performance, a mask sculpture is very rarely viewed as finished until until a performance is completed with that artwork. That's important. Some cultures to think about. Cultures, as mentioned before, lots of African cultures are intertwined with their geographic area and themes. As again, I mentioned some of them before. We have ancestry in many African cultures. Their ancestors aren't really deceased per se; they're still connected in with them with spirit. Authority, as mentioned in the first slide, some artworks were focused on having more authority than others and showing their divine rule. And this is a new topic I'm introducing right now, but it's non mnemonic devices. Sorry for my pronunciation. But basically, some artworks were made to preserve their history. In reality, some artworks look very difficult to understand to the naked eye. But there were certain people back then who were tasked with reading their history, and this some artworks were saved in histories, as the one right here. History. So for this one, history is read in the fingertips, and especially for this one artwork right here, a specialist called the Mboudier and will trace the patterns of the beads on the artwork and recall and recite the oral history of the Luba people. So that's really important for some. And finally, as for religious practices, so you can basically separate African art into three different categories. First, we've got activation, which, again, as I mentioned before, is like basically some artworks are rendered incomplete until a sacrificial or religious ceremony is occurred with them, and then they're considered complete. Then there's mediation, so some artworks are offered as offerings to the dead. It's kind of like something you give to show respect. And then you have initiation, where some artworks will tell people more knowledge in terms of that. So basically, in more detail, for like the first one, they're like activation, ritual specialist add sacred materials like herbs or animal parts to give the sculpture a skull. So like that example is the Inkisi Nkondi, which yeah. The second one, the action is like the offerings, as I mentioned, would be like with stuff like food or drink or prayers, which helps the object. That's like a reliquary feeling figure. Then third is like basically some African cultures there was a special society that was initiated so that people would understand more info, and that is explained in the Bundu mask, which you can see right here. And basically, young people would be in this case, young people would be taken away from their community to a secret spot, otherwise known as a bush school, where they would learn spiritual secrets and emerge into society through a mass dance, which is important for some artworks. So yeah, that's like the overview of Unit 6 of APR History African Art. And as you go through our website, you'll see more info and more of these recurring themes and topics I mentioned throughout this presentation. Thanks. Yeah.